Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
And I got a male down in the middle of the street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about the Teryl Orcutt case, and I have Katie Jeffries, First Coast News, with me.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, happy to be here.
Great. This is a case that you did a series on, your Unsolved series. You did a segment on not that long ago, in 18.
It was August, I think, of last year.
August of 18. We constantly communicate on cases to do. This was Clay County, which is neighboring Jacksonville area, and a smaller jurisdiction.
Lower crime
rate. I think they have 4 total unsolved
at the
sheriff's office, and then a few more at the police departments around there. But this was the oldest one over in Clay County.
Yes.
And they hired a specific detective, Rob Schoonover, to come in and handle the cold case investigations. He joined us a couple weeks ago, and we kind of hit on this case and some of the other ones. And we'll show your segment from First Coast News now, and then we'll come back and we'll get into it a little bit deeper.
Perfect.
Sound good? All right, let's do that.
In these boxes at the Clay County Sheriff's Office lies the story of Teryl Orcutt. It begins on January 21st, 1990, early in the morning.
She was heading home about 4:30 in the morning from Jacksonville to Middleborough.
But she never made it. A man on his way to work found her car on the side of County Road 218. Door open, driver's side window down, and the engine still running. He went to the nearest store to call police. Teryl's purse was still on the driver's seat with her money and wallet untouched. Then the first break. People in a house just 500 feet from where her car was found told authorities they heard something strange early that morning.
2 people heard a female saying, "I didn't do it, I didn't do it," and then heard a car pull off.
Searches were formed, and the area around 218 was combed by investigators and volunteers. But just 7 days later, the case would turn from a missing person to a murder investigation.
Her body was found 50 feet off of this dirt road in a wooded area.
Not covered or hidden, but dumped in the tree line off Lee Road, less than 4 miles from where her car was found.
There was 2 stab wounds to the chest, and she had a broken clavicle on her left side.
Teryl's sister, Cheryl Turner, remembers the moment her mother got the news.
She didn't change. She just grabbed the sweater and her nightgown and took off up there.
They were met by the sheriff and a preacher that told them. Teryl, whose life was on the upswing, young, ambitious, about to be promoted at SunTrust Bank, her life had been viciously ended. The investigation began, first by looking at how her Thunderbird was found and her injuries. With the driver's side window down, could her broken clavicle be from someone reaching through the window and violently pulling her out? And why was she on 218 in the first place? Her sister says her route home should have been 295 to 103rd, then south on County Road 217. And what about those words, "I didn't do it," witnesses heard? And where her body was found on Lee Road, a dirt road that just connects back to Blanding.
You got to think, who knew to put her there? So someone, was familiar with the area.
Over the decades, numerous investigators have looked over this case, adding on to the already large case file. Detective Rob Schoonover says there have been a lot of persons of interest, but no specific suspects. And Teryl's family is continuing their fight for justice, no matter how difficult it seems.
My mother died of cancer before she got her answers. And I promised her while she was going through her treatment that I would push this. And I'm pushing it. But I'm not getting nowhere.
But between Teryl stopping in that dark area, her purse being left untouched, and the stabbing of a petite young woman, the location of her body, Cheryl thinks her sister knew her killer.
In my opinion, it was personal. Very personal.
And the decades have not eased the still very raw pain of losing her sister. She still keeps Teryl's hope chest filled with pictures and tapes, the little things that remind her of her little sister.
It hurts like hell. She's been dead 28 years. She's only been alive 26 years. So it's a crying shame that your murder goes unsolved longer than you've been alive.
But Detective Schoonover has been going through this case piece by piece and firmly believes the truth is out there.
Someone back there in 1990, you commit a murder, you don't keep quiet. You tell somebody. Somebody knows. And all these years, the family going through this, that it's going to take someone to step up and make that phone call.
A call that would finally answer the question, who murdered Teryl Orcutt? Katie Jeffries with photographer Jeff Renfro for First Coast News.
All right, so there you go. That was an excellent segment. You and
Thank
Jeff
you.
do such a good job, and I mean, that one was one of the longer ones.
It was. There was a lot of information, and of course, Cheryl had a lot to say that I felt like was really powerful because she's been waiting so long for answers. So we didn't want to cut down any of what she had to say. So it became kind of a longer than normal segment, but a really good one.
It's so hard to tell these stories even in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean,
it could have been longer.
Yeah, you're talking. I mean, 28 years at the time. You know what I mean? 29 years since this murder happened. There's been a number of different sheriffs. There was some controversy with this one way back in the beginning. I know that the family has had some frustration and shown some frustration about how the initial investigation was done. And we see that occasionally with older cases.
Yeah.
And of course, we always are focused on, we can't do anything about that now.
Let's help you move forward.
Yeah, what can we do from this point on? And we've really lucked out with Clay County hiring Detective Rob Schoonover because he's dedicated to those 4 cold cases that they have. The families have his contact information now. You have done 3 of the 4 stories you've done on Unsolved.
Yep. And
all 3 have received call-ins afterwards with information,
that he could follow up on.
That he could follow up on. Not necessarily that he's got an arrest being announced, not that we know of, but it's getting more information on cold cases, which is why we do this and why it's so important. And I know that Teryl's family has it's been kind of a very different approach than it has over the last almost 30 years. They actually feel like they have somebody in there that they can communicate with and talk to, and that will that is looking at it.
And Rob is great. He's so dedicated to those cases. Every time we go in and talk to him, he really cares. He's trying and working long hours to get these as resolved or solved as much as he can.
With this case, Teryl Orcutt, we've known Cheryl here locally for a long time, and there was just a lot of concern about how much had gone into the investigation, because if you remember, and it was mentioned in the story, when this first happened, there was some concern that it was maybe either a law enforcement officer or someone pretending to be a law enforcement officer that pulled
her over.
Teryl over. And she had a broken clavicle, like maybe pulled her, there was some concern. They looked into that. They were not able to substantiate any of that. But you can see where that would generate some concern as a victim's family. Are they looking hard enough? You know what I mean? When Rob took that job and I went over there and had lunch with him and met with him, and he he showed me their vault, which is much smaller than JSO's vault, but his vault, there was like 8 or 10 banker, or
Those
Rubbermaid
huge things,
bins.
yeah.
You saw them in the segment. Orcutt number 1, Orcutt number 5, Orcutt. I mean, they have a ton of information there.
Yeah.
The problem was that they never really had a dedicated, once the case had kind of gone cold, they never really had a dedicated detective looking at it.
Right.
They would always have major crime detectives when they had the opportunity coming in and pulling the file and looking at it. And that's just really hard to dedicate the resources and time necessary to solve one of these cases that way. But now they have Detective Schoonover, Rob, and he said when he first got in there, of course, Teryl's family called up and they wanted, to talk to him. And he said, give me some time to review this case files because this is a lot of information. And they did. They allowed him some time to review that stuff. And I think that worked out really well for everybody involved. So as you saw in the story, it's January 21st, 1990.
Yep.
Teryl's dating a guy in Jacksonville, heading to Middleburg.
Early in the morning.
4:30
in the morning. Yeah, still dark.
Yeah. Going back, she lives with her mom, but she works at SunTrust Bank. She's got a very close-knit family, a couple of sisters, and then at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. It was early in the morning. A guy finds that somebody reports the car on the side of the road.
Yeah, it was when the sun was coming up, I think, because they saw the car.
Yeah.
So it was probably like 6:30 when the sun was coming up.
Not that long, within a couple hours of
Engine
leaving.
Engine still running. Door open, window
Passenger
down.
door is wide open. Driver's side window is down. Her purse is laying in the seat or laying on
with
the
her money and
with
her
money,
wallet,
credit
and stuff
cards. I saw another report that said her prescription glasses were found like 50 feet from the car.
Yeah.
I didn't confirm that with Detective Schoonover, but and then witnesses come forward and say that they heard a woman yelling.
I didn't do it. Yeah.
So these are all those kinds of things that led people to believe that it might have been someone impersonating law enforcement or even a law enforcement officer. All of the Clay County Sheriff's officers were accounted for that evening. But whether it was somebody pretending to be that or not,
Because they wondered in the dark, why would she pull over?
Right.
Why would she pull over and stop her car unless it's somebody she knew or if she felt she was being pulled over? So that was always a question of why did she stop?
Right.
On that
Right.
road?
Yeah. And then I guess that road was not exactly
And that's not her normal route home.
Which is another kind of twist.
Yeah, that's what Cheryl told me. She's like, it didn't make sense of why she was on that road at that hour because that's not the most direct route from her boyfriend's house to her house, her mom's house. So they didn't understand why she was on that road anyway.
It becomes a missing persons case at that point.
Forgive us, we're both a little
We're both got coughs, and we got some construction going on behind us, but we'll do the best we can. It becomes a missing persons case. They search this area. They don't come up with anything. A week later, I think it's a young boy is out riding around on an ATV or
finds
he's
her
in the
body
woods.
in the woods.
He finds her body in the woods.
And it's not too far away. It was what? I think
4
like
miles?
4 miles? Yeah.
Within 4 miles of where the car is found. Off Blanding and Lee Road, or Lee Drive.
Yeah,
south.
and Lee is a horseshoe. So
And it's like a dirt road at that time.
Right.
I don't know if it is now, but at the time it was a dirt road. Middleburg is not a heavily populated area now.
No.
In 1990, even less so. So there was, Detective Schooner brings that up in your segment and says,
how would you know to put somebody there?
If that's a very unique spot, and you either kind of know your way around the area, or you wouldn't be there, particularly at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, in the morning.
Right.
So that was something that I know Detective Schoonover said kind of stuck in his head, like why there, and how did you know that existed? But her body's found. It's been there for a week.
They could tell though she'd been beaten and stabbed to death.
Stabbed a couple times in the chest. She has the broken clavicle, which they don't know if it was from an altercation getting her out of the car maybe the seatbelt,
Right.
you know, trying to yank her out of the car, or later. They couldn't tell if she had been sexually assaulted, I think, because of the condition of her remains. You talked with Cheryl. Her mom, their mom, has since passed, and you know, Cheryl has told the story before about her mom finding out, and then how devastating it was to her mom. When you met with Cheryl, she's got some health problems right now as well, and she was she promised her mom that she would not give up the fight for justice for Teryl. She's had to kind of focus on her own health a little bit here recently, and I'm thankful that, and I know she is too, that in the last year we've had a spotlight on our website. You've done the Unsolved thing. We had Detective Schoonover in here for Facebook Live recently, and now we're sitting here talking about it again.
And Teryl's case is back kind of
Teryl's
in the spotlight.
case, and it's staying there. Where there's a constant reminder. They have their own Facebook page, Justice for Teryl Orcutt. They're constantly trying to promote the case, but it devastated this family, and it has not let up on them, in the almost 30 years since. They have really, really struggled and asked. So I'm hopeful that we can, someone out there, Detective Schoonover has said on a couple of occasions that this is that type of case that the public, coming forward and helping out with could really be a difference maker. And, so that's kind of why we're pushing it out there again today, hoping that someone has seen this. Already there's been people that called in when you ran the story the first time.
It was a case that was heavily talked about in the 1990s as well when it happened, because in Clay County, Middleburg, murder it didn't happen.
Right.
So when this did happen, and it was very violent, and it was just, first she was missing, and then they found her body, and the condition her body was in. There was the whole county was talking about it, and so they want to hear from people who, probably are still talking about it. You never know what somebody has said in the last, 20 years about this case. So
yeah, it's like if you called before and you gave them a little bit of information, but you have
call
more.
Again.
Yeah. Give them everything that you've got, because this is getting more attention than it has in a long time, and it's starting to kind of creep back into people's minds, and there's easily somebody out there that may remember something else or something new. We should say that from what we understand, the ex-husband and boyfriend whose house she was leaving were cleared.
Yes.
Because obviously that's where people are going to go, first. She's leaving her boyfriend's house at 4:30 in the morning. Maybe he had something to do with it. But what we understand is that he was cleared. She did have an ex-husband as well, but he was cleared. So that was not the direction that the case was heading.
And Rob told us there are persons of interest in this case. They don't have a suspect.
Right.
A definitive. They can't for sure say this was a definitive suspect.
Yeah. There's a few people on their radar that they talked with back then, that he was going to reach back out to and try to connect with again and talk to see if anybody, we talk about it in the past, relationship changes. Maybe somebody knew something then, but they weren't in a position where they felt safe coming forward, and now they are in a position where they're not with that same person, or they don't have dependency issues, or whatever that situation could be, whatever that relationship. Maybe they've become religious. There's all different types
clear
of
your conscience.
Yeah, that was we had that recently here in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Somebody just walked into the police memorial building and said, "I'm here to confess to a cold case murder."
And I hope people who, when they watch this, and some people watch because they're just interested in true crime, but I also hope that people watch and they get a grasp of how this has taken a toll on the families waiting for that answer. That, even though it's been a long time, it's been decades. Cheryl, she still cries when she talks about it. She still just wants some type of closure to find out what happened that night.
Clint, can you show the slideshow of we live in a violent society, and sometimes we become immune to this to these acts on other human beings, on our fellow citizens. And I think it is important to remember that these victims are people, and that they have families, and it's
just hard because she's trying so hard to keep her name out there, keep her sister's name out there, keep the case going. But I mean, I know with her own health issues, it's hard because it's like, how do you keep pushing something after 2 decades?
Yeah, and their other sister, Meryl, she lives in Colorado or out on the west coast, out west, and so she manages the Facebook page, is my understanding, handles most of the Facebook posts and pages, information and updates. So she's doing the best she can from where she is. Again, Cheryl still does a ton considering her health issues and what she's got to spend more time focusing on right now, her own health. But you look through these pictures and, again, that was one of her nieces or nephews on her back, the family photo. I mean, it's important that people remember that it's not just a name, it's not just a number, it's not just one of 4, cases in Clay County. That Teryl, was a young woman that was successful. I mean, she's, working at the bank and is getting promoted and successful. Appears to have a lot of friends.
Yeah, just 26 years old.
Yeah, lots of family that was really, really close knit. One thing I've learned when talking to them is that, her and her sisters were extremely close, and obviously the mom. I think Teryl was the youngest of the daughters, and she it had quite an impact on their mother losing her, and I think you had a couple of articles, in your story on the written piece. You had some newspaper clippings, and we found some that just when her mother was still alive, just how devastated she was, trying to get answers and justice, and she missed out on that. She's not here anymore, but her other family members are, and friends. As we started promoting that we were going to do this today, the family started promoting it on their Facebook page, and it was interesting to go see people commenting that said, we haven't forgotten.
Yeah. I
remember her, and that's really helpful for a family to know that there's people out there that still care about their loved one.
And remember, have distinct memories of their loved one.
So there was another interesting little twist in this case. Detective Schoonover talked about it when he was here. Meryl somehow gets information from someone, or finds it on her own. I don't know the exact story, but about 3 hours away from where Teryl's car is found, and then her body, 3 hours north in Georgia.
Coleman, Georgia, right?
It was Hazelhurst, Georgia, her name was Coleman.
Oh, that's
Rhonda
right. Okay.
Sue Coleman. Another victim, 4 months later, May of 1990, is her car's found on the side of the road, driver's side door open, engine running, headlights on.
And they even look alike.
And look at those pictures of that. That's Teryl on the right, the bigger photo, and that's Rhonda up in the top left. I saw some other photos of them while I was doing some research too, and when they take their glasses off, they look, strikingly similar. So, I mean, that doesn't automatically equal, that the cases are connected. But what was interesting about this was that Meryl found out about this other case. She gave the information to Detective Schoonover, who had never heard of the Rhonda Coleman case in Hazelhurst, Georgia. Immediately called up to the investigators there. They had never heard of the Teryl Orcutt case here, and they started comparing notes and working together to try to figure out if these cases are connected.
Yeah.
There are some differences in the cases. Rhonda's body was found a few days later. It had been burned in the woods. But, the fact that they're within 4 months of each other, relatively easy drive, a geographical area, and that cars are found on the side of the road like that, certainly indicates enough to start looking into whether they're connected or not. We don't know yet if they are.
But it's good. It goes to show Rob, he takes things so seriously. He gave him the information and he followed up on it.
And he was kind of excited about it when he was sitting here talking with me. I mean, he's like, I'd never heard of this case before, and that's an involved family.
Taking what's given to them, giving it to law enforcement.
Passing it on to law enforcement and just trying anything and everything. Rob was saying that he hadn't had an opportunity yet, but he was going to look in and see if there were any other cases similar to that, with a car found on the side of the road, a young woman goes missing. Rhonda was, I think, 18. I think she was still in high school. She was close to graduating high school when she was killed. But just odd how similar the cases are, and who knows what information Detective Schoonover will find out. But it would be pretty amazing if the victim's family is the one that provides the information that helps, if not solve it, link it to another one where maybe they can start.
That opens new doors.
I mean, we have no idea if they have suspects in that Rhonda Coleman case. If they have other persons of interest. And if one of them has connections back down to this area, that opens up a whole new world. And, when we're dealing with cold cases, that's what we need is one more lead always, one more tip, one more bit of information to have to vet and see, where we end up. Again, I wrote down the Clay County Sheriff's Office phone number because they put out recently they did a Facebook post asking for information on this case. And I, they're a smaller jurisdiction, so they have like a communications line or something. But if you have any information on the Teryl Orcutt case, you can call the Clay County Sheriff's Office at area code 904-264-6512. Or you can call Crime Stoppers. Again, that's
1-866-845-TIPS.
Yeah, and then up to a $3,000 reward.
Yep.
You can remain anonymous with Crime Stoppers, and
you could bring peace to a family if nothing else.
We were talking about it before we kind of went live that we want one of these cases solved. That you've worked so hard on. You and Jeff have done these stories on. I want a family to get an answer. Yeah, and
even if it's not a conviction, just an answer.
Imagine being able to share that moment with Cheryl. You know what I mean? Who we've met, who has become part of this family, and her sister Meryl too. We haven't had the privilege of meeting in person, but I've communicate with her regularly, and you just want so desperately to be able to tell them that somebody came forward, that we finally reached that right person, and that they came forward, and that it was enough. I don't have any insight into this case and who the suspect is and who did this, but when we deal with these older cases, 30 years old, 40 years old, there is a chance that the person that did this is already dead, or they're already in prison for something else. And I don't always know how a family is going to react if they don't get their day in court, but I have to believe that knowing
is better than not knowing. And if somebody's dead and in prison, that means that they're not doing it to other people, right?
Which is really our battle at this point, trying to protect others that have that may be out there, may be victimized by these people. Was this what are the chances that this is a crime of opportunity, that somebody just at 4:30 in the morning happens to come across a young woman driving by herself and convinces her to pull over? And what are the chances that it was somebody known?
It's hard because you're thinking, okay, if you're driving a car in the dark, how do you, and especially in that area too, there's no overhead street lights, so like you can't really see in the car. So it's like, why? How do you get that person to pull over? Did you recognize the vehicle that's near you? Or it's hard to understand.
It really is hard to understand. And, neither of us were able to read through the 10,
The 4 boxes. They didn't let me have that access.
Yeah, of the Orcutt case, but those are, I'm sure, the theories that they looked at. Is it somebody known to her? How do they convince her to pull over? Why is the passenger side door open? Was there somebody with her? Did she try to run and jump out of the passenger side?
Yeah. There's so many theories.
It's just you try to put yourself in that scenario, and it's it just leads you down. You could be going down a rabbit hole that is nowhere near what actually happened. So you have to be careful with that stuff. But we do think it's important to get the information out there. Teryl Lynn Steele Orcutt,
26 years old.
26 years old. Leaving her boyfriend's house in Jacksonville, Florida, heading to Middleburg, January 21st, 1990, at early in the morning, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. There's I believe, a tight window between when she's known to leave her boyfriend's and when her car is found. But then it's 7 days before her remains are found. And since then it's just been a battle to find out what happened in that span of time. Her car was found on 218. I don't know if we've said that yet. Yeah, I don't know if we did either. County Road 218.
Sorry, forgive me.
Yeah.
Hold the fort down for a second.
Yeah, sure. The passenger door open, engine running, lights on, just off the side of the road. If you look at that image there, you can just kind of see. I mean, she did not pull safely off to the side of the road. I mean, and you can see there too. That's a great shot that shows no street lights, no housing subdivision. Again, this is 1990 in a very rural area, but it had to be extremely dark, or just starting to get light, barely starting to get, But I was looking at this picture. Yeah. You doing okay?
I don't know why. I'm getting over a cold, guys. I'm so sorry.
The street light situation. There's no neighborhoods. Yeah. There's no, she's barely pulled off the side of the road.
It's so dark back there. When you think about it, there's no light.
And look, that's the other direction. I think, you can kind of see over to the edge of the picture, like some fence, wooden post fence or something. And I think those are the people when they say they hear her yelling. But those houses are way off the road, the few houses that were out there. Lots of property. And, so she had to be yelling pretty loud for them to be able to hear her. Because obviously she woke them up, basically. Yeah. So that's about where we stand with this one. We saw Detective Schoonover just a couple weeks ago, and he said that he is still waiting on some testing from the lab, that he's still trying to communicate with some of those.
I'm so sorry.
Communicate with some of those people that he talked to back then, and hoping that any of these segments and Facebook and social media posts will generate that new tip or lead that will come in.
Hopefully so.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to let Katie
catch
her breath. And we will. Thanks again for coming in today, Katie, and doing this with us again. We'll have you back real soon, and we'll be back next week with another case.